You are listening to Salty Believer Unscripted.
This is Salty Believer Unscripted. I'm Josiah Walker.
I'm Brian Catherman.
And on today's episode, I want to talk a little bit about the SBC.
Okay.
We've mentioned on other episodes that you and I both pastor a Southern Baptist church. And we've alluded to an article on SaltyBeliever.com that says autonomy of the SBC entities that you wrote and posted on there.
Right.
And so I want to talk to our listeners who maybe might not know what the SBC is.
Okay.
I get asked all the time, what is the SBC? On the news, they say that it's the largest denomination,
yeah.
Right, of evangelicals. And I've got people say, well, it's not a denomination, it's a convention.
Well, so there's a ton of confusion.
Right.
So and the last podcast with the Lifeway stuff. Hey, what do we do about it? How about this?
Right.
How does this work? What about the stuff with the record? There is some. The confusion is wide-reaching.
Right. And
even to your introduction, you said
Right.
we're part of an SBC church.
Right.
But actually,
You tell me all the time, well, the SBC only exists a couple days out of the year.
Yeah,
we
so
just talked about the convention.
So actually, we are a church that affiliates with the SBC for the purpose of mission and cooperating our resources to train up pastors, to send missionaries, to plant churches, to lobby government through the ERLC, to produce curriculum. So we are not under the SBC. Okay. We are a church that works in cooperation with other churches, and that cooperation is what's called the SBC.
Okay.
So that's where the whole autonomy of the churches are. They don't have authority over us.
Right.
We can participate with them or not. It's completely voluntary, right? We
basically a bunch of independent churches came together for the work of
so you're in seminary. You had a church history class. Let's go to how it started, and that helps us to understand what its purpose was, and then we can get to where we are now.
So when did the SBC start?
You had a history class.
I don't have the date, man.
So I have this book. I'm gonna hold on. So I have a book here called SBC FAQs: A Ready Reference by Keith Harper and Amy Whitfield. And this thing's getting more and more outdated. It's my understanding that Amy Whitfield, at least, is producing another edition of this, or maybe they both are. I don't know. I don't know. I've heard rumor that another one of these is coming out, which if it does, I'd love to talk about it on the podcast. But this was from 2018, and mine's already outdated because the Baptist Faith and Message has changed, the Constitution has changed, there's a bunch of stuff in here.
Sure.
But it's helpful. So in the beginning, it has a little history, and I think it's 1845.
Okay.
May 8th, 1845 in Augusta, Georgia. A number of churches came together for the purpose of doing what? You've got to remember this from your history class.
Sending missionaries.
Okay, so why did they do that?
Yeah, because it was, a lot easier for all these small churches to send a missionary somewhere and support him overseas if they pooled their resources, pooled their finances, and,
So 15 churches can maybe support one missionary.
One guy.
And that's how it started.
Right.
Well, where did it go from there? Do you remember? What was kind of the next big push? What did they work on after they realized they needed to send missionaries? What else did they do?
Well, they started a Sunday school board.
Okay.
To help.
Which I can't remember which came first, but yeah, they did that.
Yeah, to help equip churches with curriculum and lesson plans to help teach the Bible.
Because one church isn't just going to be able to produce all. It's a ton of work, right?
Yeah.
And then what else did they do? I mean, you're part of one.
They established seminaries.
They
train up pastors and preachers.
And I can't remember if Southern Seminary was first or the Sunday school board was first. But over the years, they've put together an entity, and they've established an entity of the Southern Baptist Convention, which actually technically does not fall under the authority of the churches in the Southern Baptist Convention. And that's the point of that article.
Correct. To
do these purposes. So the idea is this helps advance the mission of the church. So in the early years of all of this, the idea was that this cooperation of churches served churches.
Right.
I think the issue at hand today, the question that we need to ask is, who serves who now?
Sure.
Do the churches serve the SBC entity or cooperation, which it does sometimes seem that way, certainly. Did the churches serve the entity by giving them funds and resources, or do the entities and the SBC itself serve the churches?
And we should probably explain how that works too, right? Because we send funds and resources to a local association.
Yeah, let's walk through that. Okay, that's a good idea. So for those especially who are not SBC, but for those who are, and this will help explain why when you see stuff in the news, when you see various things going on, kind of why what's happening is happening. So for starters, the SBC itself is the conglomeration or the messengers of the churches that go to the convention. They handle the business of this said cooperation for a couple days. They do various business. And then they have instituted an executive committee from that group that handles the business throughout the year.
Okay.
That executive committee has a president. So there's an executive committee president. There is a convention president. The convention president is the one elected by all the messengers. The executive committee has these trustees, or these people that are not trustees, I guess they're committee members, and they do that business. Okay, so that's technically the most official of the SBC, I guess, that the SBC Executive Committee, but more so the messengers, the president, all that stuff. And then you have the entities, which are, so that Executive Committee and those messengers instituted an organization called the International Mission Board, and gave them a charge. Your job is to send missionaries, and you're going to take your trustees are going to be appointed from the messengers. They have a committee called the Committee on Committees and the Committee on Nominations that are going to send you the trustees, so that you get the trustees from the messengers. And apart from that, that's the only way that the entity can be controlled by the messengers. Apart from that, the messengers can't come together and vote and say from now on we want it to be this or we want it to be that. There was a lot of debate on should the IMB vaccinate during COVID or not. Well, it was the IMB's decision. The messengers and the churches had no say.
Right.
They instituted a group called it had a different name early on, but the ERLC, the Ethics and Religious Liberties Commission, is a very small group that was started with trustees, with all the same stuff. It's an entity, and its job is to pay attention to what's happening in Congress and to lobby and to deal with ethical stuff. Well, there was a lot of people that were super upset with them a few years ago. Messengers had no say. They'd come together at that meeting. They'd say, we make a motion that the ERLC can't do this or can do that, or the president can't say this or can't say that, and you have no authority over that entity.
Interesting.
Same thing for the North American Mission Board, which has been very evident because the messengers have been demanding, we want to see how the money's being spent. There was a really good motion that just can only ask. We would like to ask that maybe the North American Mission Board would be willing to produce a report that would show how the churches that were planted since 2012 to today have fared. And you know what? Kevin Zell can say, nope.
Sure.
You can't tell us what to do. Unless those trustees say, yeah, we should do that, it's not going to happen.
Okay.
The seminaries. There's 6 Southern Baptist seminaries. They all have their own trustees. For our sake, in Utah and Idaho, we don't have enough Southern Baptists out here. We don't get to draw trustees from our 2-state convention, which I'll talk about in a moment, to sit on any of these trustee boards, with the exception of the International Mission Board. It takes at least one trustee from every convention, local convention, and there's like 42 of them, I think.
Right.
And then the executive committee takes somebody from every, but that's it. So we don't have any say. We don't have any trustee in the seminaries, not even Gateway.
The North American Mission Board.
Gateway's out here in the west where we're at. North American Mission Board, no say whatsoever.
Okay.
We can be on the committee. I've been on the Committee on Committees a couple times. You've been on the Committee on Nominations. But even then, if it's not really somebody from our area, we don't really get to speak into it too much. We can't. I mean, it just doesn't. You don't know. So
that's helpful.
It's helpful to know. We can't dictate anything to those entities, right? And so if you're frustrated with a seminary or with whatever, sorry.
Right.
That was our problem, like when we were talking about with Lifeway on the last podcast. Like we don't have a say, right? So that's nationally.
Okay.
And then I kind of had hinted at these more local conventions. So in most cases, a state will serve as a state convention. We have 2 states, the Utah-Idaho Southern Baptist Convention. The churches that want to affiliate with the Southern Baptist Convention affiliate through those state conventions. You don't have to anymore. You can go directly nationally, but it used to be that it was that was your closest connection. So we are a part of a 2-state convention. And within that 2-state convention, they have their own constitution that's separate from the Southern Baptist Constitution. They still use the Baptist Faith and Message, which is the national faith statement. But guess maybe technically they wouldn't have to if their messengers at the UASBC or one of the state conventions voted not to. I don't know.
Right.
Anyway, so we have that local arm that has a director and has a president and a convention president and it has local tasks.
Sure.
And we have the national arm. So you think like the United States, you have the federal government and state government. It's and they work. The federal government and the state government work together. Sometimes they like each other, sometimes they don't. Money flows between the two, and specifically, money flows from the church, typically, most case scenarios, to the state convention. The state convention has designated a certain percentage of that money, which they send on, which is called the cooperative program. They send on 50%, 35%, whatever they've decided, goes to the national SBC. The national SBC then divvies it up based on how they voted, and money goes then to the entities. So all the entities get their money through that system, which is really tough for the state convention because that's where all their money comes first. So if we, say, didn't want to support the North American Mission Board or ERLC or one of the seminaries, or we didn't want to participate in that situation, and we wanted to withhold our funds, which is really the only way we can influence those entities, if at all, then the one who gets hurt the most is the state convention.
Sure.
So the state convention sort of becomes the pit bull or the bulldog for championing the CP, championing all this stuff that's national.
CP being the cooperative program.
The cooperative program, yeah. So they're sort of like, well, we got to... Nobody's ever going to really rock the boat because there's a ton of money involved here. So again, who serves who?
Well,
and how does this thing work?
I want to come back to that who serves who too, because you said that we kind of set up these entities to do work, right? The Southern Baptist churches are a group of churches that came together to send missionaries. So we created things like the International Mission Board to send missionaries overseas, and the Home Mission Board or the North American Mission Board to send missionaries here across North America. But you're saying now we don't really get to control how or what they do.
Well, technically, we really never got to control. If a motion is made at the business meeting to expect something to be done, it's out of order. It can only be we make a motion that the messengers would request this, and they can just say no. They don't. That's been the situation with the North American Mission Board and this whole finances thing, and he fights it, and like, hey, we're transparent, we're good, but nobody that brings those motions feels comfortable with that. A lot of other people who aren't there don't seem to feel very comfortable with that, so then they don't partner with the North American Mission Board. We've had some people in our two-state convention have to leave our two-state convention because we're required in Utah and Idaho anyway that you have to financially support the cooperative program. It's in our Constitution. And you have to provide what's called an ACP, which is what does that mean? It's some accounting thing, but it's like, how many members do you have? How many baptisms? How many whatever? And then they use those numbers to determine how big your convention is. Then they determine how big your convention is to decide if you can put a trustee on a committee or not.
So some of these other local conventions where they have trustees on these committees can kind of speak to their trustees, and then their trustees can...
I would suspect so, but we had an executive committee once, like, you wouldn't talk to the churches. Like, they're like, it's not my job. You put me here. So there's sort of a breakdown in communication sometimes between the entities or the national stuff or even the two-state thing. There could be, there's probably people who have a breakdown with this. So that church I was talking about, they were trying to communicate, hey, we have a problem with an entity, one of the entities, and we don't feel like it's good stewardship to give money to that entity. And frankly, a lot of other people are coming to the same conclusion, including myself. I'm like, I think it's bad stewardship here. At least at the moment, until we can get some questions answered. And then maybe we can move forward. But the problem is, they decided we didn't want to do this. So we don't want to give money to the cooperative program because then money will go to that entity. And so they actually had to ask they remove themselves from cooperation. And other churches have maybe done the same for a variety of reasons.
Because that's the biggest thing to remember is all these churches are just cooperating together. I feel like when I talk to friends and stuff, they think there's this hierarchy of a top down where they tell us what to do at the church level. And that's not really the case.
Yeah, so in the podcast we talked about before with Priscilla Shire and Lifeway, or the guy making the motion of Beth Moore, why do you sell these books? We don't have any way of saying we vote that Lifeway doesn't sell these books. We can't. There's no vote for that. So the only thing we have is, like, I guess we don't vote with our dollars. A lot of people say, hey, I don't like what's happening with Bud Light, or I don't like what's happening with Disney, or I don't like what's happening at Target, so they don't go to those entities or those organizations.
They don't support them,
The only kind of that, if that logic were to be extended, I don't like what's happening at Lifeway, so I guess I'll stop buying things at Lifeway.
Sure.
Or, hey, I love Lifeway and I want to support the home team, or you can send an email and you can try to get a response, or you can whatever. I mean, it's just not what your friends think, right? It's not some like we've got it all sorted out.
So where you don't really have a say in what goes on in the entities, what do the messengers from the SBC churches, what business do they conduct when they gather together?
So they do have a say in everything that's the SBC and the SBC Executive Committee. So they commissioned a sex abuse task force to review issues of sex abuse and to do various things. They determine the Constitution and who, how we function and who is a messenger, or who is a church that can send messengers in friendly cooperation, or who isn't. That was the big thing this time. They modified the faith statement. They modified the Constitution. Then they also passed resolutions that say when all these churches gather together, we proclaim that abortion is bad. We proclaim that sex trafficking is horrible. We proclaim that whatever.
The Bible's inerrant.
The Bible's inerrant. Yeah. So but they can't direct those entities. And the hard part for me is the church does the major work.
Sure.
The entities should be coming along and assisting the church, but the church can't tell the entities how they need help and how they want to be helped.
Right.
They can say something, but that doesn't mean that it's going to happen that way. And so that is an interesting dynamic, not a big deal if the entities are hearing the churches and if they're doing what's really actually helpful for the church and if they're being faithful in those ways. It is a big deal if they deviate from those things because there's no actual solid recourse except don't participate, withhold funds, don't partner with those entities, which is really unfortunate. I mean, like there was a pretty hefty sex abuse, hiring, firing problem, and a whole bunch of financial problems at one of the seminaries. And I mean, it was a big deal. Actually, a couple of the seminaries had some issues that surfaced, but the messengers couldn't say we want to change that.
Right.
We just saw an article not long ago about massive overspending on the part of a former president at Southwestern.
Well, and I saw something in the news the other day that said one of our seminaries has an accreditation warning against them right now for various reasons.
I didn't know that.
So,
that's not good.
Right.
So when we say, okay, or there was at one of the seminaries a professor who was kind of prominently out on social media and was talking about the value and the resources and the tools with critical race theory and CRT and why this is so important and why we have whiteness and this problem and that problem. And that professor, I think, is still, I mean, this was like a vice president or something. And so what if the messengers were wanting to pull back and say, wait, no.
Yeah.
Or wait, yes, they can't vote on that at all. They have to trust that the trustees will do it. But it's been said the trustees kind of get handpicked a lot. Yeah. And we've been on those committees. That can kind of go lots of different ways.
Sure.
And so the question is it really that the entities are hearing from the churches, even if the messengers all show up? If all the churches sent messengers and you had 10,000 messengers, 20,000 messengers, do they really have a say? I think the answer is no, right? Like, I don't. So again, it comes back to who's really serving who.
Right.
Are the churches expected to serve this sort of big machine?
Yeah.
And if it's working well, it's working well. And a lot of times it is working well. I mean, let's be honest.
Sure.
A lot of times we're sending more missionaries overseas.
Right.
There are churches being planted. There is curriculum being published.
Right.
There are seminaries training pastors. Guidestone is helping with retirements. Like, these things are good, and we've kind of Frankensteined them all together, which is why I use a picture of Frankenstein in that post. But then what happens if they don't do good?
Correct.
What happens if there is a rogue agent in there? What happens if somebody's putting razor blades in the apples and feeding them to everybody?
Sure.
Now we got a problem, right? Now we got a big problem.
Right.
So what do you do with that?
I guess be mindful, use discernment, and vote with your dollars and vote with your messengers, right?
Pray your face off, right? Pray.
So
So I just want to conclude maybe with this. If you're listening, you're not SBC, you're like, what in the world is all that? Hey, we feel the same sometimes.
Sure.
Well, it's kind of a whirlwind. If you are SBC or you're involved in a church that affiliates with the SBC, if you're involved in this, it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to let's get it fixed.
I hate feeling like I can't voice my concerns, right?
We
should be able to speak through those things.
So we changed our Baptist faith and message.
Yeah.
I agree with the change. Al Mohler agrees with the change, and he was, kind of championing this. But even he, in an article I read just the other day, is like, I don't think the way we changed it was right.
Right.
We shouldn't be able to change this stuff so fast.
Correct.
That we need to be able to come together. If we're going to work together, it can't just be about our dollars.
Right.
It has to be about how we're going to work well together and what we need for the churches in the changing times. Some of this stuff might be adjusted.
Sure.
Like the Baptist Faith and Message or like a Constitution issue. But the goal should be that this cooperation is for the purpose of serving the local church, all the way down from the bivocational guy, the church of 15, all the way up to the the mega church with 25 campuses and whatever. Like that should be
right
what we're shooting for.
Yeah. We should be able to
Does that answer your
work better
questions?
together.
I
don't know if it's answered my question or given me with more questions.
The book again that answers lots of questions is SBC FAQs, a ready reference by Keith Harper and Amy Whitfield. I mean, it has history and short little things and reports, and it is a little outdated, but it is a really, really good start, especially if they have another one coming out.
And then, as we mentioned, you have a post on our blog, Autonomy of SBC Entities. Just look for the picture of Frankenstein. That's on SaltyBeliever.com. If you have any questions, concerns, maybe you have some concerns with the SBC, drop us a line, SaltyBeliever@gmail.com, or fill out that form on our website. Until next time.
Thank you for listening. Find more information at SaltyBeliever.com.